Assalamualaikum and greetings to Doctor and all of my friends. My name is Muhammad Hazi Imran bin Muhammad Zaini and I am the first presenter. My group is going to present the topic of multiple parties, coalitions and team negotiation. In this chapter, we're going to look a little bit further at 6 levels of analysis beyond one-on-one negotiation, which are multi-party negotiations, coalitions, principal-agent relationships, constituent relationship, team negotiation, and last but not least, intergroup negotiations. We will recognize key challenges for each level and offer constructive tips and strategies for maximizing negotiation effectiveness. The subtopic that I'm going to touch is about the multi-party negotiations. First and foremost, we will start with the introduction. What is a multi-party negotiations? A multi-party negotiation includes bargaining between 2 or more parties in order to solve a problem. This process allows a group to exchange information and perspectives, keeping track of all the data from each side's perspectives and the variables into which a solution must fit becomes a massive obstacle for the negotiators involved. Multi-party negotiation introduce many tiers of difficulties and complexities that are typically absent in two-party negotiations. Multi-party negotiations are undoubtedly the most difficult to manage because each party must bring a unique perspective to the table, adding a new dimension to the negotiation process. The key to overcoming these obstacles is to anticipate them and have corrective measures in place both before and during the negotiation. We will move on to the key challenges in multi-party negotiations. The first challenge is coalitions. It is a formation of group of 2 or more people who utilize their skills in order to influence the outcome of the decision in a blended situation involving at least 3 parties. Coalition formation is one method to benefit the weak group members to gain a larger share of resources along the negotiation process. Second, the negotiators will face greater challenges as they strive to achieve their individual goals while also dealing with the pressuring issues of remaining cohesive and moving in the same direction. Negotiating with multiple parties has numerous advantages. Most notably, there are more chances for making trade-offs and creating value than in common two-way negotiations. But to achieve their goals, each negotiation representative may use their own negotiation strategy and tactics. The more players involved, the more complicated the interplay strategies becomes. Each player at the negotiation table will also be reacting to the strategy and tactics of the other players. To succeed in this environment, you must be skilled at negotiating. Furthermore, every party has its own set of objectives and goals that is hoped to achieve through negotiation. It is obvious that each party will attempt to navigate the negotiation using various approaches aimed at fulfilling its personal interests. As a result, the negotiation becomes tense and acceptable resolution is not reached. To resolve this, all participating teams must analyze each party's goals and objectives and attempt to find common ground on which they can be clubbed together. The last section that I'm going to explain is the strategies in multi-party negotiations. The number one strategies that often used is appoint a chairperson. The best solution is to have a neutral party with no stake in the negotiation process as they act like a neutral facilitator. For example, we could hire a consultant. This will give everyone a fair hearing and will bring some order to what could otherwise turn into a chaotic situation. If we choose someone from the group who is also involved in the negotiations, we must be watchful of their own goals or agendas. It should be obvious that they will be far from neutral, right? Next, multi-party negotiation will have more negotiators at the table. So, this makes it difficult to manage multiple point of views while also making sure that our perspective are being heard by others. That is why the negotiators must do their homework first about whom they are going to face on the negotiating table. In addition, it is critical to listen to people in a multi-party scenario in order to understand what they are truly required. To listen well, make sure that the negotiators at the table have enough space and time to express their needs. The best way to ensure this is to take the initiative and ask questions. It is critical to manage the negotiation process in such way that everyone involved in the negotiating has an opportunity to participate in the discussion. Last but not least, stay on the table. When all parties want to reach an agreement, it is unwise for some of the group members to leave the table because coalitions are more possible to occur when groups walk away from the table, which could be extremely damaging to the group.
Next, I Sarah will be presenting on coalitions. Coalition is a subgroup or two or more individuals, parties who combine their resources to affect the outcome of a decision in a mixed motive situation involving at least three parties. This exerts greater influence on outcomes by pooling their resources. It is a temporary group or union of organizations usually formed for a particular advantage. Coalition building is one approach for members of a group who are ordinarily weak to gather a larger share of resources. Coalitions involve both cooperations and competitions when it comes to gaining members and allocating resources. Next is key challenges of coalitions. First, optimal coalition size. Coalitions should contain the minimum number of people necessary to achieve the desired goal. Coalitions are more successful when organizational membership is restricted and there are fewer groups making decisions and sharing resources. Because coalitions is difficult to maintain with fewer people around the table, there is then incentive to do more together. In particular, to focus on building close, respectful public relationship between the individuals involved that explore their personal and organizational interests. Next is trust and temptation in coalitions. Sometimes members of coalitions remain intact even when it is not rational to do so. They are comfortable with the other members of coalitions. So sometimes members coalition prefer status quo bias. Even a new coalition structure that offers greater gain is possible. Status quo bias is an emotional bias, a preference for the maintenance of one current or previous state of affairs, or a preference to not undertake any action to change this current or previous state. So, members of coalitions, they prefer to stay in their coalitions rather than taking new coalition structure that offers greater gain. Next is coalition integrity. Members stick with their current coalitions. Next, dividing the pie. Because there is no standard system to fair allocations, the distributions of resources among coalition members is complex. Junior negotiators often settle for equal divisions, while experienced negotiators never do so because they are willing to and able to exploit differences in their relative bargaining power. Bargaining power is the ability to induce opponent to accept an agreement on one's own term. Next is principal agents negotiations. In negotiation, the principal parties are decision makers, while agents are people who represent the interests of principal decision makers. in negotiation, you have to know who's sitting at the table. Some of these individuals can make binding decisions on the spot. In many other situations, the people involved represent the decision makers. They may have only limited authority or they may have no authority at all. However, there are charges associated with working with an agent. Agents reduce the resources available to be distributed among the principals because they are frequently compensated for their services. Furthermore, ineffective agents disrupt the negotiating dynamic and as a result obstruct agreements. The agent's interests may be contrast with those of the principals, which particularly troublesome. Independent agents must be compensated for their services. Many of these independent agents earn their income through commissions. The more an agent sells, the more they earn in commissions. It is not uncommon for independent agents to inflate the sale to increase their commissions. Advantages of agents. First, expertise. Agents usually have more expertise in the negotiation process. For example, when a client wants to buy a real estate, they can negotiate for a less price. Second, substantive knowledge. Principals often identify agents who have level of knowledge or expertise in the subject matter of the agency. Such expertise generally result in a higher level of proficiency in the negotiations. In the realtor examples, familiarity with local real estate market, laws surrounding buying and selling property, and the ratings of the local schools may be some information that the realtor could bring to the table. Third, networks and special influence. Principals often seek out agents who have an existing network that will aid in the negotiations. In the agent's network allows her to exercise additional influence on the negotiations or the other party. Fourth is emotional detachment. Agents are less emotionally involved in the outcome of negotiations. Emotion can often compromise logic and lead to irrational decision making. Fifth is ratifications. The actions of signing or giving formal consent to a treaty, contract or agreement, making it officially valid. After an event, the principal can assess the agent's action. If the principal chooses, she can accept unconditionally any activities made by the agent that is not within her stated authority. Meaning, if there is a condition made by agents that are not stated in the contract, the principal can choose whether to accept or reject it. Six is fee saving. The principal might dismiss an agent mistake or faults. In the case of negative outcome, this layer of separation may allow the principal to save their reputations, meaning if agent fails in the negotiating process, the principal may dismiss the agent to save face. Next is disadvantages of agents. First, shrinking ZOPA. ZOPA is short form for Zone of Possible Agreement, which is a bargaining range in area where two or more negotiating parties may find common ground. So, why this disadvantage of agents is shrinking ZOPA? The agent will generally receive some form of compensation of reimbursement for their services. This diverts attention from the value of what stakes in the underlying agreement. Also, an agent may not have the authority to adjust target or reservation point, meaning that the agent may not have the authority to adjust the price, the highest price or lowest price in the agreement. So, as such, the zone of potential agreement is reduced. Second, incompatible incentive structure. Principal-agent relationships are often structured in such a way that the agent's incentives collide with principals, such that reaching a decision that is not the best interest of the principal will benefit agent more. The principal and agent must make sure the negotiation incentives are aligned. In the end, an agent's purpose is to negotiate a deal. Therefore, agents are motivated to place a pressure on anybody who is eager to achieve an agreement. Agents are motivated to complete agreements if they are not aligned, the negotiation process would progress are slow, and the principal wouldn't get the optimum outcome. The third disadvantages of agents is loss of control. The authority to act on behalf of principal is given to the employing agent. Any actions by the agent within her authority bind the principal. As such, the principal loses a level of control over the negotiations because agents is acting behalf of the principals. Fourth is the fourth disadvantages, agreement at any cost. Agent may have irrational desire to achieve a deal at any cost. When the agent purpose and goal are achieved an agreement with the other party, the agent may overly focus on that goal, which is to achieve the agreement with the other party, then pursuing a more advantageous partner with the opposing party. Next is strategies for working effectively with agents. First, shop around. All agents are not created the same. Find an agent that demonstrates the above reference benefits without identifiable disadvantages. If you meet an agent for the first time, don't think he or she is particularly equipped to represent you. Inquire about the agent's strategy for successfully representing your interests. Inquire with the agent about your obligations, about the nature of your relationship, and if any of your mutual duties. Inquire about the agent's bargaining skill and methods, like how long have you been selling real estate full-time, or what can I expect in terms of communications. Second, know your partner before meeting your agent. Knowing your partner before meeting with your agent, this will help you in determining the agent's authority and goals. You may need fully convey this to the agent when acting on your behalf. In other instances, you may need to convey your interest in your agent without giving away your partner. This reserves your power as the ultimate decision maker in the relationship. Capitalize on the agent expertise. If the agent has level of expertise, it is important to put this knowledge or skill to work. Be careful not to set the limits on the agent that diminish the utility and of these attributes. Fourth, tap into your agent's source of information. Always attempt to tap into your agent's sources of information. This is one of the greatest benefits that the agent brings to the relationship. Agents have access to a lot of information thanks to their professional connections and networks. Whether your agent refuses or is unable to collect information, interview another agent to determine whether he or she is able to do so. Lastly, use your agent to help save face. An agent creates a layer of personal interaction between parties. As such, the principal can use this level of separation to avoid accepting responsibility for loss in the event of an undesired outcome. Meaning that sometimes negotiators make that they get to be perfectly reasonable proposal that are insulting to the other party. When this situation happens, negotiation may start on a losing cause. In an agent-mediated negotiation, you can attempt to salvage damaged egos and relationship by blaming your agent.
Team negotiation is where two or more co-negotiators with similar interests and priorities engage with two or more co-negotiators on the opposite sides with similar needs and value, which that means multiple persons negotiate for an agreement on either side of the discussion in a team negotiation. Team discussions are prevalent in significant corporate transactions. On a negotiation team, different personalities play different roles. For example, future bride and groom negotiate with their wedding planner about how they want their wedding day to become. In certain circumstances, one individual may play many roles. Although negotiation teams are routinely utilized to negotiate on behalf of corporation, later is known about how they overcome the hurdles given by within team dynamic to develop a strong across-the-table team negotiating strategy. Challenges that face negotiating teams. Firstly, picking out teammates. There are three criteria that should be considered when picking a teammate. Firstly, expertise in negotiating. People that are skilled at negotiating may be able to design an effective frameworks to a complicated conflict scenario. A negotiation specialist may help to expedite planning, ensuring the team members avoid the four primary negotiating pitfalls and initiate a dynamic problem-solving approach. Secondly, technical knowledge. It is advantage to have someone with technical competence in the area of expertise. Thirdly, interpersonal abilities. Numerous interpersonal skills are needed for negotiation, including the capacity to create relationships, effectively communicate and debate a power or right-based argument to one preference. Second, how many on the team? A few brains are preferable to one. Although the expectations will increase, same as demands rise with group size, picking advice and more. However, in order to form a team, they should pay a lot of attention on how many people needed, as it will bring a consequence if too many people on a team. Coordination issues become more prevalent as teams expand in size. Third, communication on the team. Communication on and information sharing are enhanced when members are acquainted or have a relationship. For example, when do an event, it will be benefit to pool their different information if the team were among their members or someone that they know instead of strangers that they didn't meet once. Fourth, team cohesion. Cohesion is defined as the measure of good relationship inside a team. Pressure, the total of pressure and expectation operating to retain participants in the group, and the outcome of all effort to push on members to stay in a team. Cohesive grouping outperform less cohesive groups. Team members are held to by several kinds of relationships. Members of common identity groups are drawn to the groups. Individuals members may come and leave. Members of common bonds, grouping and drawn to certain members of the group. Lastly, information on processing. Members of the organization frequently negotiate as a team or group since no one individual possesses the skills and experience needed to negotiate successfully. As a result, information can be shared across the team members. It is much more effective for each team member to oversee a specific piece of information so that no one person is overburdened by too much data. Thus, when storage capacity is reduced, the probabilities of effectively recovering the needed information decrease. Furthermore, material supplies exclusively by a fraction of the group members is less likely to be considered and discussed. They are affected by the common information bias. Members of various groups do not have access to a certain data and details. Individuals desire knowledge from others. Through distributing labor among team members, team can become more efficient. However, cognitive process is dangerous because if a team lost one of its members, knowledge may be lost to the entire group. As a result, groups are faced with a decision: distribute responsibilities that raise member reliance to every member, or share knowledge which is inefficient and unnecessary. Strategies for improving team negotiation. First, prepare together. Researchers believe that successful teamwork preparation is so vital that we created a worksheet or plan for it. Planning as a group generates a transactive memory system in which members of the group comprehends the data and someone else has and where and when to use it. In one study, for example, groups were given guidelines on what to construct a record player. Individuals trained separately in some groups while training together in others. In terms of overall result, groups that train together outperform those who train separately or with diverse groups. Second, plan schedule breaks. Ensure to provide gaps in your negotiation to allow team members to meet privately. Most teams spend a lot of time in private discussion and far too little periods at the table. It is basically ineffective bargaining behavior. Third, assess accountability. It's indeed essential to measure how responsive members of the team are to individuals outside of the team. If teams are liable to a manager, for instance, they are much more productive from when they bargain only unto their own sides. Lastly, goal and strategy alignment. It is important that team members share same aims and values. Major research with active four-person team demonstrate that disagreement among subgroups harm negotiating effectiveness. The greater the amount of organizational commitment, the less work and interpersonal friction there is in team. Intergroup negotiation occur when parties identify with their organization and interact with the other party based on membership in other groups. Intergroup interaction encompasses both ordinary living and complicated political and international ties. Intergroup negotiators includes members of a student councils and university administrators, union and management negotiators, and group of students from competing universities. Nations negotiate with other nations on a greater scale. Challenges of intergroup negotiation. First, in-group bias. In-group prejudice, also known as in-group bias, is preference for one in-group, which is a social group with whom the individual is closely associated. Simply expressed, it refers to bias in favor of one's own group. Furthermore, because group obtain social support from their fellow in-group members, such views might increase intergroup conflict. As a result, it may not be possible to bargain effectively. For example, International Football League (NFL) or any other athletic tournament throughout the country competitions among teams is frequently eclipsed by animosity among supporters. People who prefer to prioritize their team fans over fans of the other team in such situation, since both are not regarded equals and hence interacting with them is strictly prohibited. It's not surprised that many leagues divide followers based on their allegiance. Individuals then bargain with either a member of their own group or a member of the other groups. Even though the information about the negotiation situation was identical in both cases, negotiations with members of out-group were expected to be more contentious than negotiations with members of in-groups. Additionally, the mere prospect of negotiating with an out-group members increased in-group bias. Second, downward social comparison. Whenever people anticipate talk with members of the opposite group, people typically engage in downward social comparison. We believe the competition is less appealing than members of our groups on a few organizational significant criteria. Furthermore, after effective negotiation with out-group, intergroup relations become more strained, and downward social comparison almost vanish. Negotiation with out-group members poses a challenge to organizational, but to the degree the integrative agreements are possible, negotiation holds tremendous potential for enhanced intergroup relationship. Although the initial assumption may be rather negative, encounters with members of opposite groups frequently have a positive influence of intergroup relation provided many essential criteria are satisfied, such as mutual reliance for goals accomplishment. For example, when they join the another group, they found some criteria that their group did not have. Therefore, they will try to improve their group. Third, extremism. Conflicting groups lacks an adequate comprehension of the opposing party viewpoints and misrepresents the opposing side's stand in order to encourage the sense of conflict. Each side perceives the other to have more radical and constructing ideas than would be the case. People perceive greater disagreement with competitors over principal fundamentals to their own party ideological standpoint than those central to their rival viewpoint. Furthermore, individuals feel their rivals are motivated by disagreement to their own fundamental values rather than by support of the adversary's core values. A naive realism concept explains that extremism happen because people expect others to share viewpoints. When a disagreement arises, people are first tempted to use evidence to persuade the opposing party. When this strategy fails to heal divides, opponents are viewed as fanatics who are out of touch with reality. Lastly, stereotype. Stereotype is any thought widely adopted about specific types of individuals or certain ways of behaving intent to represent the entire group of those individuals or behavior. These thoughts are believed mere norms or may accurately reflect reality. In intergroup negotiation, parties identify with the organization and often hold negative impression about members of the other organization. This is bias in which one team assumes that all individuals in a group think or will act in conformity with a preconceived notion. For example, men outperform women on a visualization test reported as a measure of special ability, while women outperform men on the same task described as a measure of perspective talking. Strategies for optimizing intergroup negotiation. First, separate conflict of interest from symbolic conflict. Most disagreement between communities are caused by basic difference in either rather than paucity of resource. Conflict, for example, are regarded to be more difficult to settle whenever it arises among members of different groups than when they occur between members of the same group. But the source of disagreements remain consistent. It is critical to distinguish between symbolic and economic concern. Furthermore, opponents are more positive about intergroup dialogue when they are exposed to their rival genuine, rather than imagined perspective. Second, search for common identity. Conflict and rivalry reduce considerably when conflicting groups share a shared identity. Individuals in organization may identify at many levels. In one study, participants were instructed to concentrate on their group identities. Other parties engaged in an objectively identical dispute were instructed to concentrate on collective organization. When organizations concentrate on the collective rather than their own group identities, cooperation improves. Furthermore, the greater the group identification, the more probably groups will create a shared knowledge, leading to more integrative outcome. When communication with out-group members, finding a similar identity may be more effective than understanding their fundamental objective. When in-group members exchange information about their underlying self-interest, negotiation with them become more cooperative. Lastly, avoid the out-group homogeneity bias. Out-group homogeneity bias is derived from the term homogeneous, which implies fully same or alike. There are several reasons why people consider out-group to be more homogeneous than in-groups, because they are an observers rather than an active participants in the group. They may have an incentive to point out parallels between the outgroup. Furthermore, because it is directly tied to them and their life, individuals may find information about their in-group more personal. It might also be because they are more likely to interact with members of their in-group, making it simple to recognize uniqueness and distinctions. The outgroup homogeneity effect is the perceptions of outgroup members as more similar to one another than are in-groups members, like they are alike or we are diverse. Therefore, it is important to avoid the outgroup homogeneity bias.
Next is constituents relationships. So, what is constituents? Constituents means that someone or a group on the same side of the negotiating party but who exerts an independent influence on the outcome through the principal negotiator or to whom the principal negotiator is accountable. Challenges for constituents relationships. The first challenge is accountability. In a group negotiation, the relationship that the principal negotiator shares with the constituents requires decision-making vigilance, evaluation apprehension, and face-saving by the principals. The principals also must act in a way to unite constituencies around her actions and decisions. Therefore, constituencies' presence can be felt even if they are not physically present at the negotiation table. Besides that, accountability is influenced by gender. For example, when representing a group, women believe that they are more generous compared to the men. In addition, negotiators who are more accountable usually make more demands and are less willing to compromise than those who are not. Thus, diffusion of responsibility is a tendency for each individual to feel less responsible and become less likely to act than if he or she were alone. Next is conflicts of interest. A representative must avoid conflicts of interest with constituencies who have a wide variety of interests. This can be very difficult and in some cases impossible given the context of the negotiation. Therefore, constituents also need to understand the relationship negotiators shares on the bargaining table and also on the hidden table of constituent relationships. Next is strategies for improving constituent relationships. The first strategy is to communicate. Representatives need to really communicate with their constituents before they start their negotiation. Therefore, it is also important for representatives to understand their constituents' interests and needs and not only their positions. It is because to avoid representatives to be careless or act too early without knowing their constituency real needs. The second strategy is educate. Representatives also need to educate their constituents about representative rules and limitations in negotiation. Therefore, early in the process of negotiation, representatives need to be really clear about their role to their constituents so that their constituents know limitation of representative. Thus, representatives also need to share all of possible outcomes, not only with just favorable ones, in order to set realistic expectations. The third strategy is forward thinking. Representatives also need to help their constituents to do horizon thinking. Horizon thinking is a type of thinking which involves making projections about future outcomes. It is because a lot of people tend to underestimate or exaggerate the duration of future emotional states. Therefore, by engaging in horizon thinking can also help to assist constituents in developing a solid partner and realistic aspirations. Last but not least, the strategies for improving constituents' relationship is diverse view. In these strategies, representatives cannot expect homogeneity of constituents' views. Thus, the representative cannot expect all of the constituents have the same interests and ideas. It is because the constituents is an individual and subgroups which have different opinion, needs, and interests with each other. That's all from our group. Thank you.